Okay, hi everyone. This is the HELICS tutorial on the MATLAB interface. And in this tutorial, I'm going to build HELICS with MATLAB support and then walk through uh, some of the things that you need to know before you use the MATLAB interface and run an example with this MATLAB interface. The documentation describes how one would build MATLAB HELICS with the MATLAB interface, and I'm going to show an example of that. So this is the HELICS repository. I typically create a build directory in that repository, and we use CMake to build HELICS. In CMake, there is an option that you can pass called build_MATLAB, which will build HELICS with MATLAB support. And I can build HELICS using the make function. All of the code that corresponds to the MATLAB interface is in this MATLAB folder under Swig MATLAB. The HELICS folder here has every function that you can call from MATLAB that belongs to HELICS. There are two examples here, the HELICS, the Pi receiver and the Pi sender. And this example basically sends the value pi from one MATLAB instance to another MATLAB instance, and the Pi receiver receives that value of pi. The most important thing to note is that you need to load the HELICS shared library in MATLAB before you can call any of the HELICS functions. And all of the C interface functions are documented on our documentation. So I also meant to add, so sorry about that, that did not build it because one of the things that is required for the HELICS interface is MATLAB and the MEX compiler, which I did not have. I had the tech MEX function, so that won't work. So you need to make sure that MATLAB is in your path before you call CMake. If you change the C interface, you cannot use Swig to generate the MATLAB bindings. You have to use a custom version of Swig, and that version of Swig is linked in our documentation. And before you call the MATLAB interface, you need to make sure that you add that version of Swig to your path. The link to that version of Swig, again, is in the documentation. So this will just take a second to build. Okay, so in the Swig MATLAB folder, I have the Pi receiver and Pi sender files. So I'm going to run that in MATLAB. I have two instances of MATLAB open over here. That basically sends values from the Pi sender to the Pi receiver. And that is essentially the MATLAB interface. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, Deepak, I have one. Having worked in the past with MATLAB and things like that, there's can sometimes be a lot of issues with path variables and things like that. Are there any other common kind of problems that you've seen cropping up in terms of if people try to get this going, they're running into issues that are common to certain, say, OSs or anything like that that we should be aware of?
So the one thing about the MATLAB interface is that it uses the MEX compiler to compile the C file that interfaces with Helix. So the same version of the compiler that's used in MATLAB should be used to build Helix, and that can be challenging to do on some machines. But as long as you do that, everything should work fine. And if you make sure that everything's in your path, everything should work fine. If you have any questions, you can contact the Helix developers.
Deepak, this is Priya TM from PNNL. I saw that you're using MATLAB 2017 B, but yeah, is it compatible with the older versions as well?
It should be. Again, all this depends on is the MEX compiler, and if the MEX compiler, the C compiler that's in MATLAB that the MEX compiler uses, if that's the same as the version that you build Helix with, then everything should be fine.
Okay. Another question I had is, say if I have only the MATLAB runtime compiler MCR, can I still build Helix with that?
That I'm actually not sure about. I can look this up and get back to you.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have any other questions? Excellent. Well, thank you, Deepak.